Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Noa, and I wanted to start by telling you a little story about my name. When I was a little girl growing up in Jerusalem, I hated my name, Noa. Not only was I the shortest one in the class, I was famously short all the way through high school. But I had to have this name, Noa. What kind of a mother gives her child a name like that? It was one in a long list of things about my mother that just didn't make sense. She always wanted me to be like everyone else, like, did you see Nuki? She has A from top to bottom on her grades. And why can't you practice the piano like Avi? He practices every day. But then she gives me this name. And when I ask her, why did you give me this name? She says, oh, it's a beautiful name. It's unique. Who wants to be unique when you're in third grade? I didn't want to be unique. I wanted to be like everyone else, and no one was called Noa, not in the entire school, not in the entire neighborhood. I wanted to have a normal girl name. One day, I came home from school. My mother was washing a sweater in the sink. This is long before there were washing machines in Jerusalem. I went straight to the bathroom. I sat on the rim of the bathtub and I said, I hate that name. It's a stupid name. Why did you give me that name? And she said, oh, it's a beautiful name. It's unique. I don't want to be unique. I want to be like everybody else. Why did you give me this name? Oh, Noali, Noali. Don't you know who Noa was? She was the daughter of Tzlofchad. Tzlof who? Tzlofchad from the Bible. Book of Numbers, chapter 27. You remember how Moses led the people of Israel through the desert to the promised land? Yes, everybody knows that story. Yes, because it's an important story. Moses was giving the laws to the people. And according to the law in those days, if a man dies, his inheritance, his land, all his property goes to his son. And if he doesn't have a son, it goes to his brother. And if he doesn't have a brother, it goes to his cousin, his uncle, the next man in the clan. Now there was a man in the tribe of Menashe. His name was Tzlofchad. And he did not have a son. He had 5 daughters. Machla, Chogla, Tirza, Milka, and Noa. And when I heard those names, I thought compared to them, Noah's not so bad. You know, Machla means disease in Hebrew. Chogla is the name of the toilet paper company in Israel. Thank God she didn't name me one of those. And my mother continued. Now Tzlofchad died in the desert. And the 5 daughters, Machla, Chogla, Tirza, Milka, and Noa, came before Moses. The 5 daughters before Moses and Aaron and all the dignitaries, and they said, this is not right. That our father's name should be erased from the people of Israel just because he doesn't have a son. We want part in our father's inheritance. And Moses, without a word, went straight to God. You know, we had an open channel of communication in those days. And immediately God agreed. And God said, the daughters of Tzlofchad are absolutely correct. From this day, let it be known among the people of Israel, if a man does not have a son, his property goes to his daughter. You see, Noale, Noa, Noa. She was one of the first women to fight for their rights. I was in 3rd grade. I said, that's stupid. It's a stupid story. Oh, Noali, it's not the best part of the story. It's not. No, the best part of the story is the midrash. You know what the midrash is? Yes, it's the stories the rabbis make up. Yes, it's the stories the rabbis invent to explain difficult passages in the Bible, because after all, it's only a few lines. The daughters of Tzlofchad come before Moses. Moses goes to God. God grants them their wish, and the rabbis were so perplexed. How could it be, they thought? How could it be that 5 women go to Moses with a request that sounds more like a demand, and immediately it's granted? They decided that to achieve something like this, these could not possibly be ordinary women. To achieve something like this, they had to be something, and the rabbis decided that they had to be Amazon warriors. So big and tall, so frightening to behold, that Moses took one look at them and went running to God. You see, Nali, the only way these rabbis could imagine a woman getting her own way is if she is tall and frightening. And my mother laughed and laughed. Did I mention that I was in 3rd grade? I said, that's stupid. Everybody knows I'm the shortest person in the entire school. I'm not an Amazon warrior. Oh, Noli. It's a beautiful name. It's unique. And off she went to hang the sweater on the line. This was long ago. Many, many years ago. To be honest, I never did grow up to be much taller than I was in 3rd grade, and let alone become an Amazon warrior. And it took me a long time to learn to appreciate anything that my mother ever said or gave. You know, for some people, showing their love is very difficult. And sometimes hearing their love is like learning to decipher a secret language. I was a slow learner. It was only when I was about to have my first child. I called my sister in Jerusalem. I was living in America by then, and I knew I was going to have a daughter. And I said, you know, I've been thinking about names, and I thought about Maya. What do you think? My sister said, oh, Maya, it's great. It's very popular. You know, I just read an article in the paper. The only other name that's more popular in Israel today is Noah. 3 out of every 5 girls are called Noah. You know, the feminist from the Bible. And I remembered my mother standing at the bathroom sink, laughing at the rabbis who couldn't imagine a woman getting her own way unless she looks frightening. And I remembered my mother laughing at the rabbis. My mother never told me that I'm strong. My mother never told me that I'm beautiful. But my mother gave me that name. She named me long before feminist was a word even used. My mother gave me that name, and she gave me the gift of that story. All those years ago on the rim of the bathtub in Jerusalem, my mother's way, my mother's unique way of reminding me that being strong is not about size. My mother's secret message of love. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that story. because it always connects me to where I come from. And I think stories for thousands of years have been the way that humans have made sense of the world and have connected themselves to where they come from. But the more we hear stories of other people, the more we can hear how we're all connected. And even though we all come connected to our roots, I always have this image that all our roots come from the same source. And so I'd love sharing stories from different cultures. And this one story I'd like to share with you comes from Yemen. And since it's a college and a place where there's a lot of teachers, I thought you would appreciate this story. There once was a very wealthy merchant who had an only son. The boy's mother died in childbirth, and the merchant loved the boy more than anything. He had the best nannies and teachers and servants take care of the child's every need. He could never bring himself to deny the child anything. It was the custom at that time that a son follows his father into his business. And as the child grew, the father said, "Come, son, come to work with me. You can start learning so that when you're older, you can come into the trade." But the boy said, "Nah, it's boring. Not now, later." And he ran out to play. And every time the father tried to get the boy interested in the trade, the boy would say, "No, not now, I'm busy. Not now, later." The years went by. The boy was now a young man. He spent his days sleeping, sitting in cafes with his friends, gambling, partying, drinking, dancing. And the father was upset. He said, "Son, you really must come and learn the trade. It's time." "Why? Why do I need to work? I'm a rich man's son, remember?" "But son, what will you do when I'm gone?" "Oh, father, stop making such a fuss." "I'll figure it out." "Not now, later." The father could not bring his son to see or understand. And every day they would argue, they would fight. And finally one day the son said, "Oh, I've had enough of your nagging every day. All right, I'll come, I'll take over the business." "You can't take over the business. You haven't worked a day in your life. You first must come and learn the trade." "Oh, father, I am young. I'm smarter than you. I've had a good education. I'll figure it out." The father was speechless with rage. He stormed out of the house and started walking through the streets, trying to calm down. He came to a place where there was a clump of trees and a bench, and he just sat there lost in thought. And when he looked up, he saw an old woman was standing right there. She was leaning on a cane, and she was digging roots in the field. He stood up. He said, I didn't see you working there. I didn't realize this is your field." She smiled a toothless smile and said, "It's all right. You can stay and rest, but I have to continue my work." Nevertheless, if I had, I wouldn't have to. The man was surprised. This woman understood what he was about to say even before he had a chance to utter the words. He said, "Are the two still strong?" There is a third one that helps." And what about the friends?" Their beds became too soft, so they became restless and many left." And how are the brothers?" "They're getting closer." You're a fine riddling woman. Will you sell them?" only to someone very hungry. The man was in a much better mood. He pulled up his sleeves and set to work with the woman in her field until the sun set. When he came home, he said to his son, "Son, I've been thinking about your offer. And I've decided that since you are indeed so smart and you know so much, that you will be able to solve 5 riddles. If you can solve these 5 riddles, I am willing to let you take over the business. But if you cannot give the correct answers to these riddles, I have decided to sell everything, donate it to charity, and leave you nothing. Would you like to try?" The son said, "Father, I think I can solve riddles." "Very well. Here they are. Each riddle is comprised of a question and an answer. The first one asks, 'Nevertheless,' and the answer, 'If I had, I wouldn't have to.' The second asks, 'Are the two still strong?' And the answer, 'There is a third one that helps.' The third asks, 'What about the friends?' And the answer is, 'Their beds became too soft, so they became restless, and many left.' And the fourth, 'How are the brothers?' And the answer, 'They're getting closer.' And the last question is, 'Will you sell them?' And the answer, 'Only to someone very hungry.'" The smile disappeared from the young man's face. "Father, you can't be serious. These are not riddles. This is nonsense. You can't expect me to solve that." But the man only smiled and said, "You have 31 days to bring me an answer." The young man tried to plead and bargain and beg, but his father just smiled. And so the next day he went around and he started asking everyone that he knew. He asked his friends. He asked anyone that he met in the marketplace, but everyone looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Nobody could understand what he's talking about. And the days went by, and the days went by. And here he was on the morning of the 31st day, and he had no idea how to solve those riddles. With a heavy heart, he walked out of the house. He wandered through the streets. He came to the outskirts of town. He found a bench there near a clump of trees. He sat there, muttering to himself, "Nevertheless, nevertheless, if I had, I wouldn't have to. Are the two still strong? There is a third one that helps." He jumped up. An old woman bent down on a cane was standing there smiling a toothless smile at him. "How did you know that?" "Oh, I know many riddles, like, what about the friends?" And she proceeded to recite all the riddles to him. "Oh, good woman, please, can you please give me the answers? Can you solve these riddles for me?" She looked at him closely. "What will you pay?" "I'll pay anything, everything. Wait." He ran to the house. He didn't have any money because he gambled it all, but he gathered everything that he could find that was of value. His jewels, expensive books and clothes. He went to the market. He sold everything, and he came back to the old woman with a bag full of gold. "Here." She looked at it. This is good. I'll accept that, but it's only money. It's not enough." "Not enough? There's more money here than you've ever seen in all your days." "If you want to learn, you will have to earn it. You will have to come work with me for 1 year and a day." The young man tried to argue. He tried to bargain. He tried to beg. But she just smiled her toothless smile and would accept nothing less than a year and a day of his time. He walked home with a heavy heart that evening. He was about to lose everything his inheritance, his future, if his father will not give him more time. And so he approached his father with respect. He said, "Father, I found an old woman who is willing to give me the answer to the riddles, but she said I must earn what I want to learn, and I need to work with her for a year and a day. Please, can you give me some more time?" The father recognized the old woman, and he realized what she's trying to do. And so he agreed. He said, "I will give you a year and a day. Do not waste it." And so the next day, the young man appeared at the old woman's hut. She said, "Do you know how to make a meal?" "What's there to know? I'll figure it out." "All right." She left instructions how to bake the bread and make the soup and cook the beans, and left to work in the field. But when she came back in the evening, the bread was burned, the soup was thin, and the beans undercooked. I suppose there's more to this than I realized," he said. Perhaps you'd like to start following instructions, huh?" And so he began to follow her instructions. And every day he worked for long, long hours. And she taught him how to till the fields and how to plant and harvest. She taught him how to cook and clean and build and mend. She taught him how to chop the wood and kindle the fire. And at the end of the year and a day, she called him to her and she said, "You have listened well. Listen one more time. Your father met me working in my field. And he started to say, 'Nevertheless,' meaning, you are so old and still you have to work. And I said, 'If I had, I wouldn't have to,' meaning, if I had help, I wouldn't have to be working still. He then asked, 'Are the two still strong?' meaning my two legs. And I said, 'There is a third one that helps. My cane. It's like a third leg for me.' He then asked, 'What about the friends?' meaning the teeth that should be close together like good friends. And I said, 'Their beds became too soft, so they became restless, and when he left, the gums, they're not what they used to be, and the teeth fell.' And then he asked, 'How are the brothers?' meaning the eyes that should be close together. And I said, 'They're getting closer,' meaning I cannot see very well. I have to get very close. And then he asked, 'Will you sell them?' meaning the riddles. And I said, 'Only to someone very hungry. You were hungry to learn, so I sold them to you.'" And all of a sudden it made sense. And it was quite simple. And the young man said, thank you for solving the riddles." She said, "But think what you have learned. It may be more than the answer to a few silly riddles, eh?" When he came home, he gave his father the solution to all the riddles. And he said, "I've learned more than the answer to the riddles. I've learned how to till the soil and plant and harvest. I've learned how to cook and mend and clean. I've learned how to kindle a fire and fix a roof." And the father said, "You indeed earned what you needed to learn. Now you can take over the business." And the man said, "No, not yet." "What? What do you mean?" "Father, I want to work by your side for a year and a day. I need to learn the trade first." And you could imagine how overjoyed that father was to hear those words. He embraced his son, and in his heart, he thanked the old woman for the gift of her riddles. One of the things that I do as a storyteller is a one-woman show that a lot of you have seen. I've done it here at Montgomery College a couple of times, called A Land Twice Promised, which is my personal story of a friendship with a Palestinian woman. And as part of my work with this show, I conduct a lot of workshops, a lot of interfaith workshops all over the country, where I use a model of storytelling to build bridges of listening and understanding between different communities. And at one of these interfaith workshops in Rochester, New York, I met a man, a Muslim man from Pakistan, Dr. Bilal Ahmed. And he told me a story that just blew my mind away. And I asked his permission to receive that story, and he gave it to me as a gift. And I crafted the story, and it's just been published. And if you're interested, there's some order forms over there in a collection of books called Mitzvah Stories, Seeds for Jewish Life and Learning, or something like that. I don't remember the subtitle. But anyway, it's a collection of stories from 60 storytellers, 60 Jewish storytellers. And this story is in it also, but I'd like to share it with you now. It's a true story that I received as a gift from Dr. Bilal Ahmed from Pakistan. Bilal Ahmed grew up in Lahore, in the Punjab province of Pakistan. When he was a little boy, there was a war between India and Pakistan. And he asked his father, why is there so much hate between the Hindus and the Muslims? And his father said, when you're older, I'll explain. The years went by, and when Bilal was about 13 years old, his family went to visit his uncle up in the north. Bilal loved his uncle's house. It was the best. It was built around a beautiful courtyard with a fountain in the center. And they would eat their meals on low stools around that fountain. All the doors opened to this courtyard, and there was a stairway leading to an open balcony where there were some more rooms. Bilal loved those visits. He loved hanging out with the family around the fountain, but most of all, he loved playing with his cousins. They used to go and climb the banyan tree in the back of the house. And he was just about to run out and climb the banyan tree with his cousins when his father said, come, it's time to answer your question. What question? Come. And his father took him by the hand and led him up the stairs and walked along that open balcony, along the rail overlooking the courtyard below. And he stopped at the last door in that corridor. Bilal's heart almost stopped. It was the only door in the house that was ever locked. It was the jinn room, the room of the ghosts. His cousin said that all the demons lived there. It was the attic room. And now his father was opening that door. And Bilal said, Baba, I want to go out and play. You'll play later. Come, there's something I need to show you. And so he followed his father into the jinn room. It was musty and dark, and everything was covered with dust. Only a few rays of light were filtering through the wooden shutters. And he could hear his cousins playing on the banyan tree on the other side of those shutters. And there were cots and old furniture there. There was his grandfather's musket and helmet from the war, from the British Army. And then his father opened up a big trunk and took out a very big leather-bound book. He put it on top of the trunk. He opened one of the shutters to let a few more rays of light in, and he said, come, I want you to look at this, Bilal. This is our Bahi, the book of our family. It has the history of our entire family. It passes through the generations, from the oldest son to the oldest son. That is why it is here in your uncle's home. He is my oldest brother. And it's important that you see it. and that you open it and see what's written. So Bilal opened it. He's never touched anything so old in his life. But there on the first page, he saw his name, Bilal Ahmed Sahi, and his brother Jamal and his sister Sarah, and his father Ghulam Ahmed Sahi, and his mother Naima Chima Sahi, and his cousins and his uncles and aunts. And page after page, there were 10 names on each page, his aunts and uncles, his grandparents, everybody in the family that he knew or ever heard about. He looked up at his father. Hey, we're all written here. It's our family. His father said, yes, it's our family. Keep looking. And so he kept turning the pages, and soon the pages were with some different handwriting, and the names were strange. Sinj, Gurmit, Sinj, Sahi. That's not a Muslim name? No, that's a Sikh name. Sikh? Yes, they are your family too. Keep looking. And so Bilal kept turning the pages. And soon the names changed again. He read Anil Sahi. What kind of a name is that? That's a Hindu name. Hindu? Yes, they are your family too. Keep looking. And so he kept turning the pages. It was no longer paper, it was now parchment. And after some time, the names were unrecognizable. And then even the language was unrecognizable. He looked up at his father. He said, what does this mean? Now, Bilal's father was one of those men that liked his children to come to their own conclusions. Whenever they would ask, what does something mean, he would say, that's for you to find out. But this time he said, you asked about the hate, remember? I needed you to see this. I need you to see that God lives in everything. And I don't want you ever to let anyone tell you to hate another. Because you can see, they are all here. Muslims, Sikh, Hindu, Christian, Jews. They are all your family. Bilal was 13 at the time. He couldn't wait to get out of that musty room back into the sunshine to play with his cousins. And the years went by. Bilal left Pakistan. He settled in Rochester, New York. He married. He has 3 beautiful children. He became a physician. And about 2 years after his father passed away, he heard about the National Geographic's Genome Project. You all heard about that? It appears that you could send a sample of your DNA. According to your DNA, they can send you a map tracing the travels and origins of your ancestors all over the world. And they can also send you, for an additional fee, they can send you an analysis of your genetic ancestry. It appears that there are certain markers that are specific to certain population groups. And if your markers match the markers of that group, you are genetically related to them. And they give those people your email so they can contact you. Bilal was interested in genealogy and history just like his father, and he sent for the kit. And he took a swab from the inside of his cheek and he put it in a little glass vial with a number on it. No name at all. And after a few weeks, the results came back. And there was a map of the world. And just like everyone else in this room, his ancestors started in Africa too. And from Africa, they migrated over thousands and thousands of years to the northern part of Europe, Ukraine, Denmark, Poland. And after about thousands of years, about 5,000 years ago, they started migrating towards the northern part of India. And about 1,000 years ago, they settled in what today is called Pakistan. And after some weeks, the emails began to arrive, the emails from his genetic relations. And he received an email from someone called L. Freiberg, and another from someone called David Barry Baum, and another from Jack Salstein, Clayton Schultz, Ed Levitan. It appears that according to the DNA results, the closest genetic relations of Dr. Bilal Ahmed, the Pakistani Muslim, are Ashkenazi Jews from Poland. And it was then that he turned to his 13-year-old daughter and he said, "You know, when I was about your age, my father took me to the attic in our uncle's house, and he showed me our Bahi, the family book. And he told her the story. And he's been telling that story ever since. He tells it to his children at every opportunity because he doesn't want them ever to forget his father's words. Don't you ever let anyone tell you to hate another, because you can see they are all your family." Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how much time I still have. I'm going to tell you another quick story from my tradition. It's a story that you can find everywhere in the world. There's versions of it from Jalaluddin Rumi from the 13th century. There's Italian versions, there's English versions, there's versions all over the world. And I'll tell you the Jewish version. In the town of Tarnów, in the southeastern part of Poland, where my grandmother grew up, they tell this story. There once was a man called Isaac Benieko. And like his father before him, he was a penniless pauper. He tried to make ends meet, mending shoes, but no matter how much he tried, he never could make ends meet. His roof was always leaking, the children walking barefoot in the coldest days of winter. But whenever he managed, whenever he could, he would put a coin in the poor box in the synagogue, always thinking there are those who have it harder than me. And one night, Isaac had a dream. It was a strange dream. It was so vivid. He could see the bridge in the capital city in Warsaw, and he could see that there was a treasure buried right beneath it. He could see the pillar right beneath where the treasure was buried. He could see the treasure, gold and coins glistening in the morning sun. It was so real he could almost touch it. But he woke. And he looked around. The roof was still leaking. He was still in Tarnów. It was just a dream. But all that day, he couldn't stop thinking about all the things that he could do if he just had a treasure like that. He would fix the roof, buy shoes for the children. He would have enough to get a winter coat for his wife, Bela. And finally, he could put in the poor box a substantial donation, like a respectable member of the community. That night, he had the dream again. And once again, it was so real. He could see the bridge. He could see the pillar where the treasure was. He could almost touch those golden coins. And when he woke up, he had to tell someone, so he told Bela, his wife, and she looked at him. "No. So, you had a dream." Yeah, you're right. Yeah, just a dream. But it couldn't get it out of his mind. All that day, he thought about all the things that he could do if only he had that treasure. And that night, he had the dream again. And once again, it was so real, he could almost touch those coins. When he woke up, he said, "Bela, I must go to Warsaw to dig for that treasure." She said, "You want to go to Warsaw because you had a dream?" But not just any dream, Bela. It was so real. And 3 nights in a row, the same dream, that's not normal. And to go to Warsaw when you can't feed your children, that's normal. He said, I'll walk. And in spite of her protests, he set out that very day. And he walked for 5 long days, sleeping by the sides of the roads. And on the 6th day, he arrived at the capital city. And he walked. He walked as if in a daze to that place where the bridge was, and there he stopped. This wasn't in his dream. There were people there. Live people, walking on the bridge back and forth with carts and wagons and horses, and right near the pillar where the treasure was supposed to be were the stairs leading up to the king's palace, and there were soldiers standing on guard. How could he possibly start digging in front of all those people? He didn't know what to do. He started walking on the bridge, pacing back and forth all that day, hoping that maybe when the sun sets, the guards will go somewhere, the people will go home. Meanwhile, the guards noticed a man in tattered clothes walking on the bridge back and forth all day long. Now that's suspicious activity. They grabbed him. They brought him before their captain. And the captain looked at him and said, "What are you doing here in front of the king's palace? Spying?" And Isaac looked at the barrel of the gun, pointed straight at his forehead, and he saw his life passing before him. And he decided right then and there, in order to save his skin, he would tell the truth. Tell the truth, tell the story, offer the captain to split the treasure half and half. He'll be saved. And so he told him the story, told him the entire story. And when the captain heard that, he threw his head back and laughed. "Ah, you mean to tell me that you came all the way here to Warsaw just because you had a dream? What do you suppose would happen if everyone just left their home and started walking after their dreams every day, huh? I, for one, will be out of a job because I too had a dream. I too dreamed about a treasure. I dreamed there was a treasure behind the stove in the house of some Isaac Ben Yekel or something in a town called Tarnov. Do you see me leaving my good job here at the bridge to go to the other end of Poland just because I had a dream? Go home. It was a dream, old man." So Isaac went home. He went home as fast as he possibly could. He went straight to that old black stove. He pulled it away from the wall, and there was a pot full of golden coins. And to his astonished wife, he said, "You see, Beilale, a man can have a treasure in his own home, but unless he goes looking for it in Warsaw, he'll never know that it's there." Storytelling has been in the world for thousands of years, long before people knew how to read and write. And stories have been passed on because humans have been telling them. And it's the oral language that's been passing the stories on. And here's a tiny little story that illustrates the power of oral language. The Red Square near the Kremlin was filled with hundreds and thousands of people. Stalin was standing up on the podium and everyone was cheering. And finally, Stalin silenced the crowds and he waved a piece of paper in the air and he said, "Comrades, comrades, a telegram just arrived from Trotsky." And he opened it and read it. It said, "Stalin, Moscow, Kremlin. You were right and I was wrong. You are the true heir of Lenin. I should apologize." Trotsky. And the crowd was roaring with applause. And right there, beneath the podium, a little Jewish tailor was waving up to Stalin, and he said, "Psst, psst, Comrade Stalin, Comrade Stalin, such a telegram, history in the making, for the ages, but you read it without feeling." Stalin silenced the roaring crowds. "Comrades, we have here a simple worker, a tailor, who said I did not read it with feeling. Let him read it with feeling. Come, comrade, you read the telegram." And so the tailor got up on the podium and he opened up the telegram and he read, "Stalin, Moscow, Kremlin. You were right and I was wrong. You are the true heir of Lenin. I should apologize. Trotsky." In every generation, there are times when hope threatens to leave this world. And they say that at such time, the Baal Shem Tov, the great Jewish mystic, would go to a secret place in the forest, light a special fire, and utter a prayer, saying the long-forgotten, most sacred name of God. And the danger would be averted, and hope would remain in the world. And when his disciple, the great Maggid of Mezritz, faced similar times, he too went to that place in the forest, but he stood there in the center and he said, "Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, I don't know how to light the special fire, but I can still say the prayer, let it be enough." And it was. Hope stayed alive. And the years passed, and it came to his descendant, Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasov, to lead the people. And he went to the place in the forest, and he stood there and he said, "Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, I don't know how to light the fire, and I no longer remember the prayer. But I found my place. I found my way to this place in the forest. Please, let that be enough." And it was. Hope stayed in the world. And many, many years passed. And when Rabbi Israel of Ritzin faced dangerous times, he sat in his armchair with his head in his hands and he said, "Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, I don't know how to light the special fire. I don't know how to say the prayer, and I no longer can find my way to that place in the forest. But I can still tell the story. Let that be enough." And it was. And it still is. As long as the stories are told, hope stays in the world.